Some cruises look perfect on paper. The itinerary, the ship, the price all appear great, but the harsh reality can hit once on board. I've done enough cruises, over 130 and counting, to have learned there are 7 specific cruises to stay clear of, or to only book under very specific conditions, starting with this one. While many people love them, for the way I like to travel, possibly the way you do too, the negatives of European river cruises often outweigh the positives, especially if you love ocean cruising. European river cruising is expensive per day, certainly versus ocean cruising, particularly for what you get on board. The ships are small, facilities limited, cabins compact, entertainment modest, and the experience is more scheduled and closer to a tightly organized tour on a moving hotel. The other issue is repetition. I found, having been on several river cruises on the Rhine and Danube, they are very repetitive. They all go to the same places, visit the same sites, with a lot of cathedral visits. And they come with 2 big issues. First, water levels. If it's too high or too low, as often happens, it's impossible for the ship to sail the planned itinerary, meaning changing ships or long bus rides to and from the sites instead. Second, river cruise ships often dock side by side, which means the beautiful riverview cabin that you booked is just staring straight into someone else's cabin. But if you are a traveler that prefers everything to be organized for you, gentle, cultural focused walking tours, small ships with few passengers, no risk of motion sickness, and seeing European countries and landscapes without the hassle of constantly changing trains, hotels, transfers, and constant repacking, then they could, however, be for you. The next cruise I won't book again is a sailing ship cruise, and here is why. I thought it would be different and more thrilling than regular cruise ship cruising, with unique ships and billowing sails. But having tried it, I found it did not quite deliver, especially versus the premium cost. First, as while it was exciting seeing the sails come out, they played a very limited role. On Windstar Windsurf, we sailed under power all the time to meet the itinerary and the schedule. The sails often were out more for show, to increase speed or reduce fuel usage. That, combined with stabilizers, meant the sailing experience did not feel that different to regular cruise ships that I've been on. The fares were pretty high, and of course, as sailing ships are smaller, there were fewer venues, less choice, smaller cabins, and very limited entertainment. I also find that while sailing ships promise to have a more unique itineraries, whilst we did often dock outside towns while bigger ships were way out in working ports, once you're off that small ship sailing experience, I was in towns packed with land and other cruise passengers. So the value for me versus small ship regular cruise ships just wasn't there. However, I did actually meet many people on the trip that liked the 300 circa passenger size and valued that more than having more choice. They loved the water sport marina at the back, for example, the uniqueness of the sailing ship versus regular cruise ships, and the much more destination focused and low sea day itineraries. Another cruise that I avoid booking are foreign language cruise lines. I've had mixed experiences by going on cruise lines from different countries. I've been on Germany's Hapag-Lloyd, both expedition and regular, French Ponant, Italian Costa, and on various river and barge cruises on the French Cross Europe. The issue always is the uncertainty of the experience based on how many fellow English speaker passengers there are. I've sometimes been when there are only 2 other English speakers on board to a sizable group of around 20 people. Personally, I did find the trips in the end a bit draining, coping with not fully understanding everything and the greater challenge to be able to just strike up conversations and meet and mingle with fellow passengers. While cruise lines do try to accommodate international guests, it does vary, I've found, based on the numbers on board. This means some things don't always work, like the entertainment program. On expedition trips, I found the lectures sometimes were just live translated into an earpiece and sometimes run by language. It's all very hit and miss. I saw a lot of frustration too from English-speaking passengers from it being obvious that in the local language, the detail in various announcements had way more information than we got as English speakers. Of course, Dining, customs, queuing styles, smoking habits, perhaps even dress and socializing follows that country norms, which can be a little bit jarring. However, foreign language lines can offer a different and varied experience to what we're used to. So for those that speak the language, want to step out of their comfort zone, are confident, independent travelers, and want to be immersed in a different passenger experience than they're used to, they could, of course, be worth trying. For me, I now avoid them unless the foreign language line offers a very unique itinerary or are likely to do an itinerary way better. For example, I have booked a Penang trip to the Ross Sea ice shelf in Antarctica because they're one of the few lines that have permits to go there and have lots of experience there too. The next cruise I avoid is on the most popular way to cruise in terms of passenger numbers. I also stay away from giant mega ship resort cruises, largely because I'm driven more by ports than by having on-ship mega resort experiences, but also because the numbers and the bustle and noise is not for me personally. These new mega ships are marvels. They have huge restaurant and bar choice, water parks, incredible shows and entertainment programs, thrill rides, kids clubs and more. They're often ideal when seeing the ship as a destination, but for me, ports are way more important than all of that. As they're so big, they're limited to ports that can cope with the scale and the numbers. This means largely repetitive itineraries calling on the same few ports, increasingly with cruise line islands and beach clubs playing a major part too. They don't offer the variety and new ports that I'm looking for when I'm booking a cruise. Also for me, it's a bit louder, rather frantic, too busy, overly party-like, and has more kids and families than I personally enjoy. But of course, for anyone looking for that resort experience, they are ideal, especially for families, multi-generational groups, and even groups of friends, as they offer things for everyone to do on one ship. But saying the ports are key to what I will book, there is a port issue that drives me to avoid some cruises. I will not book cruises that are tender port heavy on larger ships. This is where the ship anchors offshore and passengers are ferried to and from land on tender boats. Tender port cruises can look appealing on paper with great options in places like the less visited Greek islands, the South Pacific and French Polynesian islands, going to smaller Mediterranean ports or out of the way Caribbean islands. And even they can go to places, say, like remote parts of Scotland with no dock infrastructure. But tendering adds risks and downsides. Windy weather and the swell can often lead to ports being cancelled. Frequently, as I found on my round Scotland cruise on Windstar, where we basically lost pretty much every port. But on bigger ships, even mid-sized ships like Holland America Amsterdam, about 1,900 passengers that I was on recently, it takes a lot of time to get off and to get back to the ship, slashing the time I have to explore in port. Now, if docked on one of those bigger ships, I can be off the ship as soon as it's cleared, but on those larger ships like Amsterdam and above, if you're not in a suite or an excursion getting priority, I found I often waited hours before I could get a tender place to get off. Now, because I like to do independent excursions, not cruise line ones, on those bigger ships in tender ports, it's really hard to predict when I can get on land, so they're much harder and much riskier to arrange and do independent tours. Tender port cruises work best on small ships like French Polynesia, on ships like Paul Gauguin or Windstar. There is another cruise I now avoid based on the ship and the issues that it has. I avoid cruise ships where I know they have known cabin noise and design issues based on my own experience from people I trust or lots of reviews. Also, where I find I cannot choose a cabin guaranteeing low noise when booking. I want a quiet cabin without much noise when cruising. This is probably one of my stricter rules when booking a specific cruise. I've experienced cabin issues and noise, including vibration, slamming doors, poor soundproofing, and other design problems on several ships. And if I do, I never book on those ships ever again. So for example, I avoid Oceania Allura class, having had and met many people with between cabin soundproof issues when I was on Oceania Vista. I actually book other Oceania ship classes instead, having had good experience on those with good soundproofing. I also avoid Seabourn Ovation and Encore, for example, having experienced really poor soundproofing in the regular veranda cabins, and then also certain grades on the Silversea Nova class too as well. When choosing a ship, if I see lots of negative reports about sound and noise, I actually avoid all of those ships and itineraries. Also, I do not book a cruise unless I can choose a cabin that is going to meet my noise needs and obsessions. So it's got to be surrounded by other cabins on all sides. It's got to be away from noisy venues. I need to make sure that it's not opposite potentially noisy areas like crew access doors and so on. If one of those cabins is not available, I do not book. For example, I want to do a circumnavigation of Australia. It's high on my to-do list. There's a great cruise by Holland America at the exact time I want to do it, but there's only cabins available under the pool deck and near some very noisy areas left. So I'd rather not take the risk. I've not booked it and I'm looking for other options instead. Now I know many people think my approach is a little bit crazy, and for people less noise sensitive and perhaps easier going than I am, this of course will open many more opportunities, but for me it's a hard rule. But I still caution on this issue because I get many messages every week from people saying they used to think I was overly picky until they went on a cruise and were affected by cabin noise. I will also not book, by the way, one of the new ultra-luxury hotel branded yachts. Why is that? Here I mean lines like Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons and Orient Express. I absolutely have a wait-and-see approach because they're incredibly expensive and they would have to deliver a phenomenal experience way above existing ultra-luxury lines, but also all of these lines have very mixed reviews. They sold on the power of a powerful hotel brand, and the cruise operation, in my view, still seems to be bedding in. I do have question marks around their viability too, and I really don't want to commit for further out. For example, the Ritz-Carlton Yachts has reportedly low occupancy rates, is building up losses, and have had their financial arrangements reorganized a couple of times, including very recently, according to different financial reporting newspapers. These lines are mostly franchising the name as well. They're not really part of the hotel groups, it would seem, and that raises questions for me. I personally don't think being an early adopter at those kind of enormous prices is for me, and I will let them bed in and reassess them later. Of course, if you have generous budgets, you really want to try small, very upmarket yacht ships, and the traditional larger ultra-luxury cruise lines do not appeal, then of course they are worth trying. But I'm going to stick to the proven ultra-luxury small ship lines like Regent, Silversea, Seabourn, Crystal, Explorer Journeys, and perhaps consider the more established scenic yachts. Another cruise that I will avoid booking is one where I can't guarantee a more adult experience, which is becoming more difficult these days, with even traditionally more adult lines chasing and having more families on board. If that's something you seek too, I have tips on how to ensure that. Join me over in this video to find out what they are. See you over there.